Over lunch, her buddy joked, "Bro, she's way out of your league." I put him in his place without raising my voice. She demanded, "Say sorry or we're over." I just grinned and said nothing. A few weeks later, guess who showed up crying at my door? Some relationships teach you that loyalty isn't always mutual, and sometimes the people closest to your partner become the biggest threat to what you've built together. I'm Brandon, 34, and I work as a software architect in Seattle, the kind of job that pays well but doesn't sound glamorous at dinner parties. For 5 years, I'd been with Sophia, 29, who was chasing her dream of becoming a professional chef through culinary art school. I believed in her vision completely, which is why I'd been quietly covering her tuition of $12,000 per semester while she focused on perfecting her knife skills and understanding flavor profiles. We lived comfortably in my downtown apartment overlooking Elliott Bay, and I genuinely loved watching her passion come alive in the kitchen, even when she'd practiced the same technique for hours until she got it exactly right. She'd transform our kitchen into her laboratory, testing recipes and flavor combinations with the kind of intensity one brought to debugging complex code. I respected her dedication because I understood what it meant to pursue mastery in your field, and I was happy to provide the financial stability that let her focus entirely on her craft without the distraction of part-time jobs or student debt anxiety. The problem wasn't Sophia's ambition. It was Kevin, her 31-year-old childhood friend who worked as a freelance food blogger and had appointed himself as her culinary mentor and emotional support system. Kevin had this way of inserting himself into every conversation about Sophia's future, always with stories about her passionate relationship with Ethan, a traveling food truck owner who'd left her heartbroken 3 years before we met. "Remember when you and Ethan would spend entire nights creating new fusion recipes?" he'd say during our dinners, his eyes lighting up with obvious nostalgia. That was real creative partnership, not just financial support. Kevin positioned himself as the keeper of Sophia's authentic artistic spirit, someone who understood her creative soul in ways that my practical tech career supposedly couldn't. He'd show up at our apartment unannounced with specialty ingredients from Pike Place Market or restaurant recommendations from his food blog connections, treating me like a helpful roommate rather than Sophia's partner of 5 years. "Brandon's great for stability," he'd tell mutual friends at dinner parties, "but Sophia needs someone who gets the artistic struggle, you know? Someone who's lived in that creative space where money doesn't matter as much as passion." His favorite topic was how real chef couples built their careers together through shared struggle and passion, always with the implication that my financial support was somehow preventing Sophia's authentic growth as an artist. "Look at Marcus and Isabella," he'd say, referencing some couple from culinary school. "They started with nothing but pure love for food, living on ramen and creativity, and now they're opening their 3rd location in Portland." That's what happens when 2 creative souls support each other's vision instead of one person just writing checks while the other follows their dream. Kevin would share these stories with this wistful expression, like he was describing some lost golden age of authentic artistic partnership that Sophia and I could never achieve because of my corporate background. I tried to ignore Kevin's constant undermining because Sophia insisted he was harmless, just protective of their friendship since childhood. "He means well," she'd say whenever I pointed out his passive-aggressive comments about my career or our relationship dynamic. Kevin was there for me during my darkest period when Ethan left, and he's been my biggest supporter through culinary school. You have to understand, he just wants what's best for me, and sometimes that means questioning whether I'm settling for safety over passion. What I understood was that Kevin saw me as an obstacle to some romantic fantasy where he'd swoop in and become Sophia's creative partner, the way Ethan never could be. He'd critique my career as soulless and disconnected from real creativity, while positioning himself as the authentic artist who truly appreciated Sophia's talent and understood the sacrifices required for artistic excellence. "Brandon makes apps that help corporations optimize their workflows," he'd tell people dismissively at gatherings. "I document the stories behind Seattle's food culture and the passionate people who create it." The irony was that my supposedly soulless career was funding the dream he claimed to champion, but pointing that out only made Sophia defensive about Kevin's character and my attitude toward their friendship. Kevin's manipulation became more sophisticated as months passed, systematically reframing every aspect of our relationship through his twisted lens of artistic authenticity. He'd arrive at our apartment with carefully chosen stories about chef couples who'd built empires through shared struggle, always emphasizing how financial security had somehow corrupted their creative vision. "I was just reading about this amazing couple in Portland," he'd tell Sophia while I worked late in my home office. "They started with a food cart and $50, sleeping in their car between shifts, but that desperation fueled their creativity in ways comfort never could." He'd share these tales with religious fervor, painting poverty and uncertainty as essential ingredients for culinary greatness while casting my financial support as creative poison that was slowly killing Sophia's artistic soul. Kevin positioned every practical decision I made as evidence of my controlling nature, turning my efforts to build stability into manipulation tactics. When I suggested Sophia apply for internships at established restaurants to gain experience, Kevin convinced her I was trying to push her toward corporate culinary careers that would strip away her individuality. "Brandon thinks like a businessman," he'd say with obvious disdain. "He wants you to follow some predetermined path instead of discovering your own unique voice through experimentation and risk-taking." Meanwhile, I was achieving something I'd worked toward for 7 years, the completion of my revolutionary AI-powered urban planning system that could optimize traffic flow, reduce emissions, and improve quality of life for millions of city residents. The project had consumed countless late nights and weekends, combining machine learning algorithms with real-time data analysis to create something that could genuinely impact how cities function in the 21st century. Major tech companies were circling like sharks, and I was fielding calls from Fortune 500 firms interested in acquisition deals that could set up our entire future financially. But Kevin managed to poison even this achievement, telling Sophia that my success proved I was more invested in corporate advancement than supporting her dreams. "Notice how excited he gets about his own projects," Kevin would observe when I'd share updates about the acquisition negotiations. "But when you talk about your culinary experiments, he just nods politely and changes the subject to something practical like internship applications or business plans." This was completely false. I loved hearing about Sophia's kitchen discoveries and often stayed up late tasting her new creations, but Kevin's constant narrative made her start questioning my genuine enthusiasm. He had this insidious way of making Sophia doubt her own perceptions, suggesting that my supportive responses were actually subtle attempts to redirect her energy toward more conventional paths. "Real partners get genuinely excited about each other's creative breakthroughs," he'd say. "They don't just offer practical advice and financial backing while secretly wishing their partner would choose something more stable and predictable." The most damaging part was how Kevin portrayed my upcoming success as a betrayal of our partnership, arguing that I was planning to use financial leverage to control Sophia's career decisions. Once that acquisition goes through, he told her during one of their private coffee meetings that she'd started having without mentioning them to me, "Brandon's going to have serious money and serious opinions about how you should use your culinary degree. Men like him don't invest in dreams without expecting returns, and I guarantee he's already planning how your career should look to complement his new status." Kevin's psychological manipulation was masterful because he mixed legitimate observations with twisted interpretations, making Sophia question everything about our relationship dynamic. He'd point out that I worked long hours, true, but necessary for completing a 7-year project, and suggest this proved I prioritized my career over her needs. He'd note that I preferred quiet evenings at home, also true, because I found peace in Sophia's company after intense days of problem-solving, and frame this as evidence that I was suppressing her social and creative energy. "Artists need stimulation and community," he'd tell her, "but Brandon keeps you isolated in that apartment like some kind of corporate wife waiting for her husband to come home from the office." The most insidious part was how Kevin made Sophia doubt her own gratitude, suggesting that feeling thankful for my financial support was actually a sign of an unhealthy power dynamic. "Gratitude shouldn't be the foundation of a romantic relationship," he'd say with practiced wisdom. "Real love means never having to feel indebted to your partner for basic support. When someone truly believes in your dreams, supporting them feels natural, not like charity that requires appreciation." This twisted logic made Sophia start viewing my investment in her education as manipulation rather than love, exactly as Kevin intended. By the time my AI system was ready for market, Kevin had successfully planted enough doubt in Sophia's mind that she couldn't celebrate my achievement without wondering what strings might be attached to my newfound success. The acquisition offer came through on a Tuesday morning. A Fortune 500 company wanted to purchase my AI urban planning system for a figure that would change everything about our financial future. 7 years of research, development, and late-night coding sessions had culminated in technology that could revolutionize how metropolitan governments approach traffic optimization and environmental sustainability. I'd created something genuinely meaningful, something that would impact millions of lives by reducing commute times and carbon emissions across major cities. The celebration needed to match the magnitude of this achievement, so I reserved the Sky Lounge, an exclusive rooftop venue overlooking Elliott Bay with panoramic views of Seattle's skyline and the Olympic Mountains beyond. I invited my entire development team, the industry mentors who'd guided me through technical challenges, and close friends who'd supported me during the grinding years when success felt theoretical rather than inevitable. This was my moment to finally relax after months of intense acquisition negotiations, technical presentations to corporate executives, and legal reviews that had consumed every spare hour outside my regular work responsibilities. The atmosphere was everything I'd hoped for, sophisticated without being pretentious, with premium cocktails flowing freely and conversation buzzing with genuine excitement about what this breakthrough meant for urban planning technology. My colleagues from the tech industry mingled naturally, sharing stories about their own project challenges and discussing potential collaborations now that my system had proven commercially viable. These were people who understood the complexity of what I'd built, the years of iteration and problem-solving required to create something truly innovative in a field dominated by legacy systems and bureaucratic resistance to change. Against my better judgment, I allowed Sophia to invite Kevin, hoping that witnessing my professional success might finally earn me some respect from her oldest friend. Kevin arrived fashionably late, dressed in his standard uniform of expensive vintage clothing that projected artistic authenticity, worn leather jacket, distressed jeans that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and vintage band t-shirt that screamed carefully curated rebellion against mainstream success. He surveyed the elegant venue with obvious disdain, his expression suggesting he'd wandered into some corporate gathering that violated his artistic principles simply by existing in such an upscale setting. Kevin gravitating toward the open bar immediately, but not to enjoy the premium whiskey and craft cocktails I'd arranged. Instead, he positioned himself as the authentic creative voice among what he clearly viewed as a room full of corporate types who'd sold their souls for financial success. "This is nice," he told the bartender loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "Very corporate. Very safe. The kind of place where people come to celebrate making money off other people's actual problems." His commentary continued as he worked through expensive drinks, lecturing anyone who'd listen about how real artists maintain their integrity by rejecting mainstream success and staying connected to authentic creative struggle. "I document Seattle's food culture," he announced to my development team lead, "the real stories behind family restaurants and immigrant chefs who pour their souls into every dish, not like these tech solutions that reduce human experiences to algorithms and data points." The irony of Kevin criticizing algorithmic solutions while consuming premium alcohol paid for by those very algorithms was lost on him, but my colleagues noticed. I watched several of them exchange glances as Kevin launched into his predictable sermon about corporate creativity versus authentic artistic expression, clearly wondering why I'd invited someone so openly hostile to everything we'd accomplished. I chose to ignore Kevin's behavior for Sophia's sake, focusing instead on meaningful conversations with people who'd actually supported my journey and understood the significance of what we were celebrating tonight. As the evening progressed, Kevin's behavior escalated from subtle condescension to outright hostility, fueled by premium whiskey that loosened his tongue and amplified the resentment he'd been carefully concealing behind his artistic superiority complex. He'd moved beyond making snide comments to the bartender and was now holding court near the floor-to-ceiling windows, lecturing my successful colleagues about the moral bankruptcy of technology solutions that prioritized profit over human connection. "You want to know what's wrong with this city?" he announced to a group that included my lead developer and 2 senior engineers who'd worked alongside me for 3 years. It's full of people who think they can solve real problems with code instead of actually understanding the communities they're supposedly helping. His voice carried across the sophisticated venue, drawing uncomfortable glances from other guests who'd come to celebrate genuine innovation, not endure a lecture from someone whose greatest professional achievement was writing restaurant reviews for a food blog that generated barely enough income to cover his coffee expenses. Kevin's resentment seemed to intensify as he watched my colleagues treat me with the respect that comes from years of collaborative problem-solving and mutual professional achievement. These weren't corporate executives impressed by financial success. They were engineers and researchers who understood the technical complexity of what I'd built, the countless hours of debugging and optimization required to create something that actually worked in real-world applications. "Brandon's always been good at making money," Kevin continued, swaying slightly as he gestured toward me with his whiskey glass, "but some of us care more about authenticity than profit margins. Some of us understand that real creativity can't be reduced to algorithms and user interfaces." The tension in the room became palpable as my guests realized they were witnessing something uncomfortable, not playful banter between friends, but genuine hostility from someone who clearly resented everything we'd accomplished through years of disciplined work and technical innovation. My development team had seen me push through countless setbacks, debugging sessions that lasted until dawn, and the kind of methodical persistence required to build something genuinely revolutionary in urban planning technology. Kevin's dismissive attitude toward their collective achievement was becoming harder to ignore, even for people trained to focus on solutions rather than interpersonal drama. The breaking point came when Kevin, emboldened by premium alcohol and the attention his controversial opinions were generating, decided to make his attack personal and public. He turned away from my colleagues and walked directly toward where Sophia and I were standing near the panoramic windows overlooking Elliott Bay, his expression carrying the calculated malice of someone about to deliver a line he'd been rehearsing for months. The sophisticated conversations around us gradually died as people sensed something dramatic was about to unfold, 12 industry leaders and close friends suddenly finding themselves unwilling witnesses to what felt like a carefully planned character assassination. "Honestly, Soph," Kevin said with deliberate loudness, ensuring everyone within 20 feet could hear his words clearly, "you're way out of his league. A real artist like you deserves someone who understands passion, not just code." The silence that followed was absolutely deafening, the kind of shocked quiet that falls over a room when someone crosses a line so obviously that even casual observers recognize the deliberate cruelty of the moment. I felt every pair of eyes turn toward our small group, my professional colleagues and personal friends suddenly thrust into the role of audience for Kevin's calculated humiliation attempt, their expressions ranging from shock to secondhand embarrassment for what they'd just witnessed. Sophia stared down at her plate, her face flushing with obvious embarrassment, but what struck me most painfully was her complete failure to defend our relationship or shut down Kevin's disrespectful attack in front of people whose opinions mattered to our shared future. I set down my drink and looked at Kevin with the calm precision of a systems architect who'd just identified the exact source of a critical error that needed systematic correction. "That's interesting perspective, Kevin," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent venue without any hint of anger or defensiveness. "Let me share some data that might add context to your analysis." The room remained completely quiet, my professional colleagues recognizing the tone I used when preparing to methodically dismantle a flawed argument during technical presentations, while Kevin's confident smirk suggested he expected either explosive anger or wounded retreat from his calculated insult. "You mentioned Sophia deserving someone who understands passion," I continued, "so let's examine the actual metrics of passion and support in this situation." I turned slightly to address the broader group, treating Kevin's attack as a case study worth analyzing rather than a personal assault worth defending against emotionally. Kevin's authentic artistic lifestyle, the one he considers morally superior to my corporate career, is actually subsidized entirely by Sophia's student loans, which I pay, making me indirectly responsible for funding his lifestyle while he criticizes my generosity as manipulation. The first crack appeared in Kevin's confident expression as he realized I wasn't following the script he'd expected, wasn't getting defensive or emotional, but instead was systematically exposing uncomfortable truths he'd assumed would remain private between him and Sophia. Over the past 3 years, Kevin has borrowed money from Sophia 23 times, I continued, pulling out my phone and scrolling to notes I'd been keeping, always with promises to pay back that never materialize, while simultaneously positioning himself as morally superior to the man who actually provides the stability that makes his borrowing possible. My development team leader was watching this unfold with obvious fascination, recognizing my methodical approach to problem-solving being applied to interpersonal manipulation instead of technical challenges, while Kevin's face was growing redder as each uncomfortable fact was laid bare in front of people he'd been trying to impress with his artistic authenticity. The total amount comes to $4,700 over 36 months, I said, consulting my records with the same precision I brought to budget presentations, which means Kevin's moral authority about authentic relationships is built on consistent financial exploitation of the woman he claims to protect from my supposedly manipulative support. Kevin opened his mouth to interrupt, but I continued with the relentless logic of a technical audit that hadn't reached its conclusion yet. Kevin's food blog generates approximately $400 monthly, while his photography side business consists mainly of unpaid exposure work for struggling restaurants who can't afford actual marketing budgets, I said, addressing my colleagues who understood the difference between viable business models and expensive hobbies disguised as careers. Meanwhile, my supposedly soulless AI system will impact traffic flow and environmental sustainability for millions of urban residents, while I've invested over $180,000 in Sophia's education and our shared future. The numbers hit the room like mathematical proof of Kevin's hypocrisy, concrete data that made his romantic superiority claims look absurd when measured against actual contribution and commitment rather than artistic posturing and borrowed money. So when Kevin suggests that Sophia deserves someone who understands passion, I concluded, looking directly at him with calm certainty, he's apparently defining passion as borrowing money without repaying it, living off someone else's student loans, and criticizing the financial stability that makes his lifestyle possible. Kevin's confident smirk had completely disappeared, replaced by the trapped expression of someone who'd been systematically exposed as a fraud in front of exactly the audience he'd been trying to impress with his authentic artistic integrity. But here's what I find most interesting, I added. Kevin positions himself as Sophia's protector while actively undermining the relationship that provides her the security to pursue her dreams without financial stress, which suggests his real concern isn't her happiness but his own access to the benefits of our partnership. The methodical destruction of Kevin's credibility should have been the end of the evening's drama, but instead of recognizing how thoroughly her oldest friend had been exposed as a manipulative fraud, Sophia exploded with misdirected fury that revealed exactly where her true loyalties lay. "How could you humiliate him like that?" she hissed, her voice shaking with anger that should have been directed at Kevin for his calculated public insult but was instead focused entirely on my calm response to his attack. "Kevin was there for me during my darkest times when Ethan left me heartbroken, and you just destroyed him in front of all these people like he's some kind of enemy instead of someone who's supported me for years." I watched in genuine disbelief as Sophia positioned Kevin as the victim of our exchange, completely ignoring the fact that he'd deliberately insulted me in front of 12 industry professionals and personal friends who'd come to celebrate a genuine achievement that would benefit millions of urban residents. "He called me out of your league in front of my colleagues," I said quietly, "and you're angry at me for responding with facts instead of letting him humiliate me at my own celebration?" Sophia's face was flushed with indignation that seemed entirely focused on Kevin's wounded pride rather than the disrespectful attack that had started this entire confrontation. "You know Kevin speaks his mind when he's been drinking," she said, as if alcohol somehow justified deliberate cruelty, "but you planned that response, you had those numbers ready like you've been keeping score of every dollar and every favor, waiting for the chance to use them as weapons." This accusation hit me harder than Kevin's original insult because it revealed how completely Sophia misunderstood my character and motivations. I'd kept records because I'm naturally analytical, not because I was planning some financial ambush of her oldest friend. "Those weren't weapons," I replied. "They were facts that became relevant when Kevin decided to publicly question my worth as your partner while living off the financial stability I provide." But Sophia was beyond logic at this point. her protective instincts entirely focused on the man who'd spent 3 years systematically undermining our relationship while positioning himself as her romantic salvation. "You need to apologize to Kevin right now," she demanded, her voice carrying across the venue where my guests were pretending not to witness this relationship crisis unfolding in real time, publicly, in front of everyone, or we're done permanently. The ultimatum landed with crystalline clarity, forcing me to confront a truth I'd been avoiding for months. Sophia valued Kevin's comfort over our partnership, his feelings over my dignity, and their childhood friendship over 5 years of building something meaningful together. She was willing to end our relationship to protect the ego of a man who just deliberately tried to humiliate me at my own professional celebration, which meant her loyalty had never really belonged to us at all. I looked around the room at my colleagues and friends, people who'd witnessed Kevin's calculated attack and my measured response, then back at Sophia's flushed face as she waited for me to choose between my self-respect and her ultimatum. "Kevin spent 3 years telling you that you deserved better than me," I said with the calm certainty of someone who'd finally understood the true dynamics of our relationship, and for once in his life, he was absolutely right. Without another word, I picked up my drink, looked at Sophia with genuine sadness for what we were losing, and told her quietly, "I hope Kevin gives you everything you deserve," before walking away from 5 years of investment and leaving her standing with her ultimatum and its unexpected consequences. The conversations around us resumed with the uncomfortable energy of people trying to pretend they hadn't witnessed a relationship implode in real time, while I moved toward my development team who'd supported me through years of technical challenges and understood that some problems can't be solved with compromise or negotiation, only with the dignity of walking away from situations that don't serve your growth or respect your contribution. Sophia moved in with Kevin immediately after the celebration, probably expecting me to come crawling back within days once the reality of losing her hit me, but instead she encountered 3 weeks of complete silence as I methodically dismantled our shared life with the same engineering precision I brought to debugging complex systems. I made strategic calls the next morning, starting with the private culinary school admissions office where I withdrew funding for Sophia's final year tuition of $30,000. Explaining that my financial circumstances had changed and I could no longer support her educational expenses. The administrative staff was understanding, apparently. Withdrawn sponsorships happened more frequently than people realized, usually when relationships ended or priorities shifted unexpectedly. I then contacted Chef Martinez at Lumiere, the Michelin-starred restaurant where I'd arranged an unpaid internship for Sophia through my professional network connections with their corporate technology consultants. "I need to withdraw Sophia Chen's internship recommendation," I explained during a brief phone call, "due to personal circumstances that make my endorsement no longer appropriate." Chef Martinez was polite but unsurprised. Prestigious kitchens dealt with networking complications regularly, and withdrawn recommendations were part of the business landscape in competitive culinary environments. The most satisfying call was to the Seattle Young Chefs Competition Organizing Committee, where I retracted my sponsorship of Sophia's entry fee and portfolio submission that could have launched her career through exposure to James Beard Award winners and Food Network executives. "Unfortunately, I can no longer provide financial backing for Ms. Chen's competition participation," I told the coordinator, who processed the withdrawal efficiently and moved Sophia's spot to an alternate candidate who probably deserved the opportunity more anyway. Meanwhile, Sophia was discovering the reality of Kevin's chaotic lifestyle in his roach-infested studio apartment in Capitol Hill, where the romantic fantasy of struggling artists supporting each other's dreams crashed into the harsh mathematics of actual survival without external financial support. Kevin's place was everything my downtown apartment wasn't: cramped, poorly maintained, with a kitchen barely functional enough for basic meal preparation, let alone the kind of culinary experimentation Sophia had grown accustomed to in my spacious, well-equipped living space. The first week was probably manageable because Kevin was still playing the role of romantic savior, but by week 2, reality was setting in as bills arrived that couldn't be paid with artistic integrity and borrowed money from friends who were getting tired of his financial irresponsibility. Kevin had borrowed $800 from Sophia within days of her moving in, claiming he needed to cover utilities and groceries until his next blog payment arrived, but instead of gratitude for her contribution, He became increasingly resentful about being forced into a provider role he'd never actually wanted to fulfill. "You're just as demanding as Brandon," he told her during one of their fights that I heard about through mutual friends, but at least he had the bank account to back up his expectations. "You want the same lifestyle without understanding that I'm an artist, not some corporate ATM machine." The irony was perfect. Kevin had spent 3 years convincing Sophia that she deserved better than financial stability, only to reveal his true character once forced to provide actual support rather than romantic fantasy and borrowed money from the woman he claimed to protect from my supposedly manipulative generosity. 3 weeks after she'd moved out, Sophia appeared at my downtown apartment door looking smaller and more defeated than I'd ever seen her, her confidence replaced by the hollow expression of someone who discovered that authentic artistic struggle felt very different when you were actually struggling instead of playing at poverty while someone else covered your expenses. "I made a terrible mistake," she said through tears that looked genuinely desperate rather than manipulative. "Kevin isn't who I thought he was, and I realize now what I threw away when I chose him over you."